Alwin Albright was born on January 18, 1945. Unfortunately, he had a learning disability, which led to him being bullied. Because of that, he quit school at an early age. His family believes he likely suffered from dyslexia, but since it wasn't as widely understood back then, it most likely went undiagnosed. Due to this, he was unable to write or spell and could only sign his name. Regardless, he still made it through life just fine, working at his family's wood pulp business. By 2019, 74-year-old Alwin was a divorced father of an adult son, living alone at the Gates apartment in Gilmer, Texas. Over the years, he had remained close to his family, especially his brothers. His family would often bring him food and small amounts of cash to help him get by, and he would almost daily stop by the local laundromat to see his brother who worked there. After moving into the Gates apartment complex, he met a woman named Amanda Garcia who also lived there, and the two became involved. However, she was also seeing another man named Mavis Waters, who Alwin didn't care for. Mavis allegedly had a lengthy criminal record, and the two men were not on friendly terms. It was even reported that Alwin ran Mavis off one time by pulling out his pocket knife during an altercation. It's unclear what the altercation was about. My guess is it was over Amanda. In early June 2019, Alwin was driving to his brother's house when the engine in his early 2000s car suddenly blew up. This left him with no way to get around, and he was unfortunately unable to get a loan for a new car. That's when a man who also lived in the apartment complex offered to sell him a 1990s black Ford Mustang for $500. However, Alwin didn't have that much cash, and the man agreed to let him pay it off over time. His brother had tried to talk him out of getting the car because it wasn't in good shape, but he bought it anyway and gave the man $50 as a down payment. He then sold the car with the blown-up motor for $200. Since he was living off his Social Security checks and had no savings, this was a lot of money for him. A few days later, on July 8, 2019, Alwin strangely failed to show up at the laundromat as he did every day. His brother found this strange and decided to stop by his apartment to check on him since Alwin didn't have a cell phone. When he arrived, he knocked on the door, but there was no answer. The next day, he tried again, but once again, nothing. Other family members got involved, and they began trying to find anyone who might have seen him. By day 3, when there was still no sign of Alwin, they reported him missing. Investigators learned that on July 6, 2019, he allegedly let Amanda drive the Mustang. When she returned to the parking lot, she accidentally hit a curb, which she claims upset Alwin. Soon after, she called 911 and said he was trying to break into her apartment. A few minutes after the police arrived, Alwin was seen walking away on foot, headed toward downtown. While he wasn't known for walking away from his home, they did confirm this through surveillance footage. Unfortunately, that was the last known sighting of him. At this point, investigators and the family disagree on what might have happened to him. The family believes he met with foul play, but investigators say they haven't found evidence to support that. It seems that after he went missing, Amanda possibly drove the car because it was found in a different parking spot than it was the day he went missing. Also, items were missing from his apartment that Amanda had previously shown interest in. It's also of note that when his family was able to get inside the apartment, they found blood on the top of his pants and the bottom of a shirt. The family requested the blood be processed for DNA, but investigators say they need to compare it against Alwin's DNA and not a family member. It's now been almost 5 years since he went missing, and as of June 2024, he has not been found, and this case remains unsolved. Ann Etta Kline was born one of 4 children to Lloyd and Jean Miller on October 22, 1946, in Brookville, Pennsylvania. Ann was described as a country girl who was kind and humble. In high school, she met and fell in love with Robert Kline, who went by Bob, and they eventually married. After graduating, they both earned degrees from Penn State. In 1968, they moved to Evansville, Indiana, after they both got jobs working at Alcoa. Bob was an engineer, while Ann worked in the accounting department. 3 years later, in 1971, 24-year-old Ann left Alcoa for a job teaching math at Lockyer College, and also enrolled at the University of Evansville along with Bob to work on her master's degree. In January 1973, Ann's classes were transferred across the street to the basement of the old Vanderburgh County Courthouse after a small fire broke out at Lockyer. Around this time, she had written a letter to her sister saying she wanted to take some time off from teaching to start a family, but sadly, she never got the chance. A week after moving to the basement of the courthouse, on January 18th, business student Dennis Clem, who also worked as a custodian in the building, stopped by Ann's temporary classroom around 2:45 p.m. to inquire about a grade on one of his assignments. According to Dennis, she told him she hadn't finished grading them yet, so he left and clocked in for his 3 p.m. shift. After that, he and a fellow student and co-worker were heading upstairs to begin cleaning when they heard someone scream. Believing it was just some kids messing around, they continued on their way. A few minutes later, they heard a man saying something like, "Get out of here," and decided to check it out. When they arrived back downstairs, they sadly found Ann dead from multiple stab wounds, but her killer was nowhere to be found. Since police arrived so quickly and never saw anyone speeding away, they reached the conclusion that the suspect most likely fled on foot. Plus, there was easy access to Ann's classroom through an alcove off 5th Street. As for who the suspect was, they theorized it was either someone who worked in the building or a student of Ann's. Robbery was ruled out because her purse with her wedding rings was left behind. Ann was known for being a very strict teacher. Could her killer have been a disgruntled student? It's also possible that the murder was premeditated because the knife found at the scene had no blood on it, and it's thought the killer had more than one knife with him. Bob was looked at but quickly ruled out after co-workers vouched that he was in a meeting 20 minutes away when the murder occurred. Plus, according to everyone who knew them, they had a great marriage. Investigators learned that Ann had a meeting planned with someone that day. Whoever that person was, investigators have refused to release their name but say they believe 100% they are the responsible party, but they don't have the physical evidence to arrest them. Years later, a woman came forward and said that her boyfriend's mother had committed the crime. Was that the person Ann was supposed to meet with that day? If so, what was the motive? Sadly, her father and mother died in 2012 and 2016 respectively, without ever finding out who murdered their daughter. As of 2024, investigators still believe they know who killed Ann, but that person has never been arrested, and her case remains unsolved. Noah Alexander Presgrove was born in May of 2004 in Duncan, Oklahoma. In 2023, 19-year-old Noah was living in Comanche, Oklahoma, and had plans to join the military. Sadly, he would never get the chance. On Labor Day weekend, 2023, Noah went to spend the weekend at his friend Avery Joe's house in Terrell, Oklahoma, to celebrate her 22nd birthday. It was her parents' house, and lots of people showed up for the party Sunday night, September 3rd. Noah had been there since Saturday, but left Sunday morning before the party to take his car home that was leaking oil. He then found a ride back to Avery's. Based on Snapchat and Instagram posts, the party went well, with everyone drinking and having a good time. I mean, it went well for everyone but Noah. The following morning at 5:53, a passing truck driver, along with a man in a white utility truck, discovered Noah's body on the side of Highway 81, about a mile from Avery's home. He was naked, besides a pair of mismatched shoes lying in a fetal position, and his teeth had been knocked out, and one of them was on the ground next to him. He also had multiple broken bones, including his nose, cheeks, and ribs. He also had severe damage to his skull. As part of the autopsy, the medical examiner performed a toxicology but found no drugs in his system. They did, however, determine his blood alcohol level was 0.14, almost double the legal limit. His ultimate cause of death was ruled the result of multiple blunt force injuries. However, they were not able to determine if the death was the result of a homicide or an accident. By the looks of it, he could have very well been hit by a car, but no car parts or debris were found at the scene. There were also no tire tracks, which you would expect if someone hit him and then slammed on the brakes. The hit-and-run theory was ultimately dismissed by investigators. even with that, they still aren't investigating it as a murder. I can only assume that's because they don't know if it was murder or an accident that was covered up. One of the main people involved in this case is Noah's best friend, Jack. At 2 a.m. on Monday, September 4th, Noah can be seen on video playing the slap game with a friend while someone in the background is holding a shotgun. That's the last video of him that night. At 3:41 a.m., one of the partygoers posted on social media that Noah was missing. This is strange because people at the party said they weren't aware that Noah was missing until they found out he was found dead. This is where Jack comes in. A guy named Justin, who wasn't at the party, sent him a text message after the funeral, pointing out that everyone in attendance who saw Noah in the casket said he looked like he got beat up by 5 dudes. Jack, who went fishing with his dad that morning, said he was the one who found Noah at 4 a.m. and claimed his face never looked like that. This seems suspicious, but Jack told News Nation that he took a polygraph and passed. However, in that same interview, he contradicted his text message and told News Nation that he wasn't aware of Noah's death until the semi-truck driver found him. Since investigators have dismissed the hit-and-run theory, why is Jack still so adamant that that's what happened? Another partygoer by the name of Caden said that Jack woke everyone up at 5:15 a.m. to tell them that Noah was found dead. Caden also said that upon learning of Noah's death, he went to the location and saw him lying on his back wearing black shorts. He claims he was told to leave while Jack stayed behind. Caden believes foul play was involved. If you remember, 911 wasn't called until 5:53 a.m. when the drivers of a semi and a white utility truck found his body on the side of the road. Also, don't forget that when they found him, he was no longer wearing the black shorts. His black shorts were later found and given to Noah's brother. Also found at the scene was his silver necklace, which was broken into 3 pieces. Law enforcement described it as white, which is normal. If it had been gold, they would have said it was yellow. There were also 2 clumps of hair found, one in the middle of the road and another on his butt. It's also of note that one of the shoes Noah was wearing belonged to Caden, while the other was actually Noah's. There were also allegedly shorts found at the scene, lying next to Noah, but they were white, not black, as Caden had previously seen. So what really happened after Caden saw Noah dead? Jack's father, Caleb, now gets involved in the story because he, along with Jack's grandfather, had a fishing trip allegedly planned that day. That's why Jack was allegedly up so early. Caleb says he received a message from Jack at 5:53 a.m. asking him to bring a hat, which is strange considering his best friend just died. Caleb then made inconsistent statements about where he was. At one point, he said that Jack called him and notified him about Noah's death while he and his father, Jack's grandfather, were heading to the fishing location. However, another time, he stated that he was at home getting ready to go fishing when he found out. He says he then drove his wife's car to the scene. Investigators have also noted that stories from other witnesses that night have also been inconsistent. Since everyone was drinking that night, there were bound to be some issues, and sure enough, there were. Partygoers said that Noah and Jack got into multiple fights that night. He then allegedly got into a physical altercation with a 16-year-old after he accused Noah of hiding his phone. As the partygoers got more drunk, girls began writing words and drawing inappropriate pictures on Noah's body. Some of those writings and pictures were on his butt and torso. At some point, he and Jack ended up on a gator riding recklessly around the property. They only stopped after Noah messed up and almost flipped it over, causing him to hurt his hand in the process. A nurse at the party looked at the injury and determined it was fine. At that point, Noah was really dirty from riding around and was given a shower by some of the people at the party. At some point during the night, Noah got upset and asked people for a ride home. He then allegedly got mad and walked away from the house. By 6 a.m. on the day Noah was found, everyone from the party had strangely deleted all of their social media posts from the night before. There were also inconsistent statements about the level of cleaning that was done at the house that morning. Some say only beer cans were thrown away, while others say there was some deep cleaning going on. There is also a conflict between Avery's mother and Noah's aunt. According to Avery's mother, law enforcement did a walkthrough of the house that morning, whereas Noah's aunt said she was told by law enforcement a walkthrough was never done. So what really happened at the house that night? Since the Oklahoma Highway Patrol has said 100% this is not a hit and run, then there is a high possibility that Noah was beaten to death. Most believe that Noah never walked away from the house alive and that some of the partygoers know the truth but are covering it up. Interestingly, even though there was underage drinking allowed at the home that night, with partygoers ranging in age from 15 to 22, no adults were ever charged. The case is still an ongoing investigation, but as of June 2024, it remains unsolved. Oakey Albright Kite Jr., who went by Al, was born to parents Oakey Sr. and Edith on May 7, 1951, in Rocky Mount Township, North Carolina. He was described as a very kind and gentle individual. After graduating from Weldon High School, he earned a degree from Atlantic Christian College. He then worked as an accountant for Stone & Webster for the next 31 years before being hired by Carter Douglas as a project manager in late 2002 or early 2003. By the spring of 2004, 53-year-old Al, now divorced, was living alone in Aurora, Colorado, and by all accounts was living his best years until it was sadly all taken away. On May 25, 2004, police went to check on him after he failed to show up for work. They knocked on the door, but there was no answer. When they entered the townhouse, everything appeared fine until they reached the basement. That's when they found Al lying dead, face down on the floor. Before being stabbed to death, he was tied up and tortured. The suspect used several knives to torture Al throughout the ordeal. After he was dead, the suspect placed the knives, a drinking glass, and a set of keys in a kitchen sink and filled it with bleach, basically destroying all the DNA evidence on those items. They were, however, still able to get DNA from other areas of the crime scene. After that, the suspect stole his truck and drove to a nearby Wells Fargo ATM where he was captured on surveillance withdrawing $1,000 from Al's account. While the suspect was captured on camera, he was wearing a ski mask and gloves and could not be identified. After getting the money, he abandoned the truck near Al's home. While Al's wallet was never found, his cell phone was discovered in a payphone booth a few miles away. Investigators didn't have to look far to find the killer. 7 days before the murder, on May 18, 2004, Al, who had decided to rent out his basement, met with a potential tenant. That man he met went by the name Robert Cooper. The meeting went fine, and the man gave Al a security deposit and half the first month's rent. In return, Al provided him with a key to his house. Unfortunately, if he had run a background check or even searched the information provided, he might have realized that everything on the rental agreement from Cooper was false. The social security number, the address, and the phone number all belonged to other people. The address was for an elementary school in Denver, Colorado. The social security number belonged to an 80-year-old woman who lived in Indiana, and the phone number was for a local retirement village in Aurora. To investigators, it appeared that Cooper's whole purpose of renting the room was to commit this crime. For one, they were able to determine that his cell phone was a burner bought from a convenience store in March. He then waited 30 days to activate the phone, which is exactly how long the store kept its surveillance footage. Once the phone was activated, he began calling around for a place to rent. A woman recalled meeting with him and said he came off as very creepy. She also said he spoke with a slight Romanian accent. She knew this because she taught Romanian at a local college. The torture methods used against Al, such as the foot flogging techniques, were traced back to southeastern Europe, more specifically to a group called Turkish Hezbollah. Investigator Paul Holes theorized that the individual may have been part of the horrible torturing practices of Turkish Hezbollah, and once the group disbanded in 2000, he had to find other ways to get his gratification. Thankfully, they were able to draw up a sketch based on that woman's encounter and Al's girlfriend, who had also seen him once. It's also noted that the suspect walked with a limp and used a cane. They even had DNA tested with the help of Parabon Nanolabs and pointed to a suspect from the Balkan region. Unfortunately, even with that, they've still not been able to identify him, and as of June 2024, this case remains unsolved. Patty Ann Stryker was born on September 3, 1964, to parents Thomas Moses and Sheila Derrick in Athens, Tennessee. Patty was described as a friendly and outgoing individual who was also the life of the party. She went on to marry Stanley Stryker, who was 19 years older than she was, and they had 2 children together, in addition to her 2 children from a previous marriage. They remained in Athens, where they owned and operated the Strykers' Premium Winery. The winery became a passion for Patty, but unfortunately, it also led to a horrible tragedy. Before I continue, I want y'all to know that I was unable to find a picture of Stan and a couple of other people involved in the case. I looked hard but had no luck. On April 10, 2000, 35-year-old Patty got up and took her children to an Athens elementary school before returning to the winery. Sadly, that's the last time they ever saw their mother alive. Shortly after 9 a.m., an employee at the winery sadly found her shot to death, and the register with all the cash in it was missing. Investigators determined that she was likely killed sometime between 8:30 and 9:15 a.m. Her husband, Stan, immediately became a suspect, mainly due to the fact that he and Patty were going through a nasty divorce, and he had even threatened her in the past. While he was able to prove with surveillance footage that he was at work at the Bowater paper plant in Calhoun, Tennessee at the time, there was still the possibility that he was involved. Some have theorized that he hired someone to commit the crime and that the cash was stolen to throw off investigators. Unfortunately, they were never able to prove that. 2 months before her death, on February 5, 2000, Joe Marlowe, owner of Mont Eagle Winery, 2 hours from Athens, Tennessee, was also murdered. Joe had left the winery that day and drove to his farm where he lived, about 20 miles away in Coffee County. When he got out of his car with the winery's money bag containing thousands of dollars, he was shot to death. While it seems on the surface that someone was killing winery owners, investigators say they could never find a link between them. A year after the murder, Patty's oldest son from a previous marriage filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Stan, seeking $5.5 million in damages. He felt that he had planned the murder and hired someone to carry it out. Not to mention, Patty had been telling everyone that he was going to kill her. With no proof that Stan had anything to do with Patty's murder, the lawsuit was dismissed. After her murder, the winery closed down and then suspiciously caught fire in 2012. Let's go back to the murder of Joe Marlowe, owner of the Mont Eagle Winery, because while investigators say there is no connection, his winery was set on fire the same year he and Patty were murdered. If they aren't connected, it's possible that someone, maybe Stan, got the idea to murder Patty and then burned down the winery years later after seeing what happened at Mont Eagle Winery. This is likely considering that Joe Marlowe's murder was solved a year later and linked back to his wife Louise, an employee of his, Roger Dale Wimley, and Wimley's wife Lori. For Joe's murder, his wife, 74-year-old Louise, was sentenced to a year in jail and 6 years of house arrest. Seems like very little considering she arranged the entire thing. She probably wasn't given much time due to her declining health from having multiple strokes. As for Roger, he was given 15 years and released in 2012. His wife Lori was given 5 months and released in 2005. 2 years after the Stryker Winery fire in 2014, this case would take a shocking turn. On February 12, 2014, Stan told his 16-year-old son and 17-year-old daughter he needed help cleaning up the site of the old winery where Patty was murdered. After arriving, he pulled out a gun and shot them. Thankfully, the shots weren't fatal, and they both fled to a neighbor's house. Meanwhile, Stan walked back to his vehicle, got inside, and took his own life. In the end, the daughter was shot twice, and the boy was shot once, but they both thankfully survived. Even with that, investigators have not found proof to prove that Stan had Patty murdered, and as of June 2024, this case remains unsolved.